Hey guys, welcome back and thanks for joining me today. So for this time we wanted to go over the importance of edges in painting, and to do that we're going to tackle a single white rose. This is a challenging subject for many reasons, and the first of which being we're trying to paint a white object in color. And secondly, we want to create a soft, natural looking rose that doesn't have a lot of hard, cartoony looking edges. So the secret to all of this is in creating some soft edges with good technique and layering on our paint. And we'll begin by learning the techniques, and then we'll go straight into the rose. So grab your paints and let's go. All right, so getting started with just some techniques. The first thing I want to do for creating a soft edge in watercolor is to go wet into wet. So first I'm just going to moisten the paper and not have a big giant swimming pool on here for the pigment to disperse into. We want it to be just moist, and then I'll load my brush, and here I'll put my mark right in the center of that moisture, and you can see how I have a nice controlled move, and the pigments give me a beautiful soft edge without shooting out too far into the paper. Now the next way to create a soft edge is to put the paint down and then come back and soften it afterwards. So what I'm going to do is load my brush, make my mark right here, and then I'll get my brush nice and clean. And I want it to be just moist, just a little bit damp. And then I'm going to run the damp edge along the side, the hard edge here, and that paint will move into the wet spot and give me a nice soft edge. And let me do the other side too. Timing is important on this one. If you come back too late, you'll start getting these little blossoms on the edge. One way to prevent that is to let it dry all the way, and then you can come back and disturb it a little bit like so by rubbing into it. But you can see if you catch it with just the right timing, you'll get the best soft edge that way. And then the third way to do it is to get paint on just a corner of the brush. So you've got a brush that has just a corner of the paint and the other corner is moist and clean. And then when you run your brush along, see, you get that hard edge on one side and a soft edge on the other side. And with that technique, you can even make shapes and quickly achieve that effect so that you don't have to come back and worry about things drying on you or disturbing. Ta-da! Now to get this one started, I'm just carefully wetting around the outside edge of my rose, and I'm using my flat brush for this just because it gives a really nice sharp edge. You can see in my drawing I kept it as simple as possible, not drawing every single little petal in there, mostly just making marks where the shadow shapes are going to be. And for the highlight areas, I want to combine them as much as possible and have those areas clear and white. So now I've gone all the way around my shape. I'm going to start adding a bit of pink onto the corner of my brush. And since I wet all the way around it, that just gives me more time to play around. And you can see as I drag this brush around, I'm getting a really nice hard edge on one side and the soft edge on the other side. And this is a good trick that you can use when your main subject is white, and this is when we're just painting the negative space or the space around the object instead of the object itself. So if it starts drying on you, get a little bit of a hard edge, just with a clean brush, come back and add a little bit of water there. So now I'm adding a little more pink and trying to pull in a little bit of the background into the flower. And here and there I'm touching with a damp brush so that I have edges that become lost and found. And that way the background isn't too distracting and you don't have too harsh of an outline. So I add just a little bit of pink and then with a clean damp brush push it around and soften it. So you can come back and charge areas with more color. Just be careful when you're doing that to make sure that you do not have a lot of water on your brush and it is mostly pigment or you'll get big blossoms. So now I'm switching to my raw sienna color, and it's just a soft yellow, and my pinks are pretty much dry, and here I'm pulling in all my midtones now. And I'm just being very careful to not paint the whole thing because remember the white of the paper is the highlights and we want to keep this a white rose, so it still needs to be have a lot of white in there even though there are plenty of shadows. And that's essentially what I'm doing, is just painting shadow shapes. I'm not going around and doing individual petals one at a time. We want to have everything tied in together. That's when you start getting kind of a cartoony look, when you do individual things one by one and you don't have an underlying color that's sort of pulling it together. Now you can see how nice and soft these yellows look, and I'm not getting muddy because the pink was already dry. So what I'm doing now is creating layers of transparent color that lie on top of each other like pieces of stained glass. So now that that's fully dry, I'm going to pull in some pinks to mix purple, and I want this to be a cool purple since it's my cool shadows. So my color is going to be a mix that's predominantly blue with just a little bit of pink in it. If you have too much of the rose in your mix, then it'll become more of a warm shadow instead. But here's when I'm giving some of the petals a bit of definition now. And again, I'm just looking for shadow shapes and not really painting individual petals. And laying the paint down, leaving the hard edges where I need it, and then coming back with a clean brush to soften afterwards. So when you try practicing this at home, just take your time to really carefully look at the flower and try to draw and paint what you see, not just what you're thinking. Now here in my darks, I'm also being careful to get a good amount of contrast, because when you have that full amount of contrast in there with your value, then it helps really make your form more three-dimensional. You can see we still have a soft, pretty rose, but it's got some darks in there, and it's got plenty of color, but it's still a white rose. And for the end of this, I'm just going to use some of that rose, and with just the very tip of my brush, I'm going to create some subtle little pink rims on the edges of some of these petals in here. And then I will gently soften them again. And there you have it, you guys. So we've got lost and found edges, and everything's nice and soft. But still we've got some good contrast, and it's got a nice sense of form, and still loose and not too tight, not cartoony. So please leave your comments, and if you're having trouble with anything, I'm happy to answer any questions, and I appreciate if you like and subscribe, and remember to come back for more.